Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Gaming Mix podcast, your official podcast from analogstickgaming.com. If you don't know me by now, my name is Jordan. I'm in charge of this podcast, so if there are any problems with it, please let me know in the comments. We're still figuring this out. As you can see, I think this is our 8th episode now. And to my left, if you don't know the man to my left, his name is Jeff. He is the founder of Analog Stick Gaming. And how are you today, Jeff?
Not doing too bad, really, except for this headset cutting in and out and bullshit.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, Jeff is using a Xbox headset, and apparently he's having some connection issues with it lately, so hopefully he hears most of what I say when he needs to. We're trying our best here, but this is going to be our Game of the Year episode, where we're both going to bring our personal top 10s and talk about some games and just kind of celebrate this year, right, Jeff?
Yeah, so we'll be going over our own personal top 10s. Oh, it's doing this thing again. If you can hear me.
I can still hear you, yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, it's disconnecting like every 10 to 15 seconds. Yeah, it's going over our own personal top 10s. We're going to have something different on the site as well, too. Like, we're still going to have our top 10s or game of the years and stuff, but we're also going to have our categories.
Yes.
That kind of range all over the place.
For people that don't know what that is, who may not be familiar with our site, what do we normally do every year?
Yeah, so I haven't been entirely consistent on it. But generally what I've done is kind of like a top 10, and then as well as like categories of like best action game, best racing game, best RPG, like this year I'm doing a little bit more categories to kind of celebrate a lot more games.
Yes.
Just in case people are like, well, like, what's a really good DLC this year? Well, you have like DLC.
There's been quite a few this year, yeah. There's been quite a few. But also the other thing is, obviously, this year I'm involved as well, so that makes that process slightly different because for people who don't know, I only joined Analog Stick Gaming in the summer. Jeff invited me to come on board as a partner. And yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to, because this process is new to me. Obviously not awards in general, but the way that we do it on the site and things like that. So I'm looking forward to all of that, and you should definitely go and check out the site and, follow the site to look out for those awards and things as well, because this will be our last episode of the year. I want to say that now. Hopefully, at time of recording, I will get this episode out tonight. That is my plan. Because I did promise you this episode on Friday, and we're a little bit late recording this one. We planned to record it last weekend originally, but I was ill.
Jordan, I know it's causing it to disconnect. Give me 1 second. Keep talking.
Cool. Okay. So Jeff is sorting out his headset, but while he does that, I want to just say, like I said, thank you for kind of listening to us in this first few episodes that we've done at the end of this year, and going into 2024, I think things will be much better. We'll be having more guests on, we'll be doing more spoiler casts. Our first episode next year, which should be, as I've figured it out on our calendars, I think you'll be seeing our first episode next year in the second week of January. And then that will be kind of our big 2024 preview, where we talk about games that are coming out that we know of, things that we think might show up in 2024 as well. Might be a little interesting conversation there, so maybe a few predictions. But yeah, I think 2024 is going to be a very good year for this podcast, and like I said, more guests on, more spoiler casts, more of whatever you want to engage in, really. Probably, as you can tell, as we've said before, this is the Gaming Mix podcast, so when things like TV or movies relate to video games, we will talk about those as well. So there's probably going to be a few TV shows or movies that we speak about next year. For example, the Fallout TV show that's coming, I believe, in April. So yeah, hopefully you'll stick with us into 2024. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. And for now, Jeff, I think we should get into a few news stories, right? Let's get into the mix, as we like to say around here.
Sure thing. Yeah, so if you've been following kind of the GTA stuff in regards to like the trailer being hacked, they had 90 clips essentially leaked ahead that showed a lot of the gameplay of it. So an 18-year-old hacker who leaked those clips of a forthcoming Grand Theft Auto game has been sentenced to an indefinite hospital order. So, Arion Kurtaj, a 18-year-old autistic boy from Oxford, was a key member of an international gang called Lapsus, it's a LAPSUS with a dollar sign. This gang has led major attacks on Uber, Nvidia, and now Rockstar, costing the firms upwards to nearly $10 million. The judge stated that Kurtaj's skill and desire to commit these crimes meant he remained a high risk to the public. He is restricted to a secure hospital for life unless deemed fit to no longer be a danger. The court was made aware that Kurtaj has been violent while in custody and with numerous reports of injury or property damage. Doctors stated that Kurtaj was unfit to stand trial due to his acute autism, so the jury was asked to determine whether or not he committed the alleged acts, not if he did so with criminal intent. A mental health assessment was then used as part of his sentencing, hearing that he continued to express the intent to return to cybercrime as soon as possible. He is highly motivated. The jury was made aware that this hack was carried out while he was on bail for a hack on Nvidia and BT/EE while in police custody at a Travelodge hotel. This hack was pulled off with a mobile phone, his hotel TV, and an Amazon Fire Stick. It's worth noting that his laptop had been confiscated, but this did not stop him as he was still able to steal and release 90 clips of the upcoming GTA release. The hack was pulled off by breaking into the company's internal Slack messaging system to declare if Rockstar does not contact me on Telegram, this is a quote, within 24 hours, I will start releasing the source code. So Rockstar did no such thing. He then posted the clips and source code on a forum under the username Teapot Uber Hacker. He was then rearrested and detained until his upcoming trial. With the GTA 6 trailer being released early this month, ahead of its originally scheduled date, the trailer reached over 128 million views on YouTube in just 4 days. In sentencing, now this is just the official account, as far as I know, is 128 million views. So we're probably looking at like way more with
Way
people
more
watching it
for
on
sure. Yeah.
Giant Bomb or Kotaku or wherever. In sentencing hearings, the team defending Kurtaj stated that his success shows that this success shows that his hack had no direct bearing on the success of the game's official announcement, causing no harm to the publisher and should be considered in regards to his sentencing. Judge Lees stated that there were real victims and real harm done here from the other hacks performed by the accused. Rockstar themselves told the court that the hack cost them around $5 million to recover from, in addition to thousands of hours of staff time. Um, yeah, like this is you got an 18-year-old with an Amazon Fire Stick
Yeah.
under police custody in a travel lodge, and he still pulls his shit off.
Yeah. I don't. First of
Like
all,
these hackers are
uh,
so young now. It's
First of all,
ridiculous.
and look, I don't like hacking. We'll talk a little bit more about hacking in a minute. There is a story that we're going to talk slightly about, but the fact that this kid managed to do something like that with what he had available to him is quite scary. Quite, it's
Like why they gave him a phone.
yeah,
Like it's basically like a phone is literally just as like technologically advanced as most computers, and there was
yes,
no laptop. It's like some 60-year-old police station. It's like you can have your telephone, no laptop.
yeah. Um,
And
but
like still,
but there is something I want to say about this is that I find it quite interesting that they say about how there was no real damage to the publisher, and obviously the trailer still got millions and millions of views and all this kind of stuff. I think it's the most viewed video game trailer of all time, if I'm not mistaken.
I
Um,
believe it's the most viewed piece of content on YouTube that's not music related.
which is crazy, right?
Because you get some like music like videos and stuff like that, whether it's Taylor Swift or
Yeah.
Blackpink or something that are like, you know, 6 to 7 times that or whatever, right?
Yeah, of course, of course. But I think the problem is with these hacks and with these leaks that happen in the video game world in general, something that we've been quite blind to, and I include everyone in this, media, um general public, sort of everybody, is the human effect of these things leaking. And
Especially when the ESA leaked like everybody's like personal home information. Like there's some people, like I remember reading that some people literally had to move because
yeah,
they were being harassed.
yeah, so
Um,
and it's like, the other thing is, we say that it had no effect on the game and things like that, right? But what we have to remember is he leaked the entire source code. That would have
yeah,
had an effect on the game. Like, I can guarantee you now, this is why Rockstar are out here saying it's cost them $5 million and thousands of hours in people's time, because they would have had to have been redoing some of that stuff and making changes which they
yeah, because
otherwise
otherwise
wouldn't have needed to
people, when
make.
it comes out, like that's likely why the PC version was delayed.
Yeah,
Is not coming out at the same time is because they probably have to retrofit that thing so that people are not hacking the app or loving crap out of that game.
absolutely, absolutely.
When you have the source code, you have the keys to the kingdom.
So this is exactly what I mean. Like, to say there is no real effect, I think, is a little bit disingenuous, or at worst just ignorant, really. Um, and it really is a shame. But this person has been sentenced to a hospital order essentially, and he won't be released until doctors say that he's no longer a threat. That's a good thing. I think that's they've dealt
Honestly, he
with,
doesn't have a mobile phone and a friggin'
yeah,
Google Chromecast
and
system.
and and
Like,
they've dealt with him accordingly to his own personal circumstances as well, which I think isn't something that we see all the time. Um, this feels like a really good way of dealing with it in the end, but the point is, this shouldn't have happened in the first place. He shouldn't have had, like you were saying, why did he even have a mobile phone? Because, you
like
know,
if he needed to text and make phone calls, give him like a freaking like Nokia flip phone that has like, like 40 by 40 resolution for pictures.
yeah, yeah. So it's very, very strange. Um, but that isn't the hack and leak that has most upset me personally in recent times, and I think everybody in the industry and adjacent to the industry has felt this one, and that is obviously the massive Sony hack that happened by the ransomware group recently, um, which has basically decimated Insomniac, and we've actually had people's personal details put out from
Yeah,
that.
like that's a thing. That's the thing that gets me the most on the leak because like, obviously footage of Wolverine is out there. There's a playable version of that game which is probably littered with so much hacking, like
Yeah,
like you're literally probably just like, yeah, sure, have access to my computer. Let me see this or play this actually. But the thing that gets me the most is the personal information. I can get if a game is leaked and we see footage and we see all that kind of stuff,
yeah,
but when it's somebody's livelihood, someone's home address, someone's contact information, things like that.
yeah,
Because like when the ESA got hacked, like one of Jeff Grubb's stalkers literally called him,
yeah.
said, "Hey, I have this information."
Which is crazy, right?
Like
Like,
that
that
is
stuff shouldn't be
scary as
happening. Yeah, it
hell.
shouldn't be happening at all. So, there is, of course, a lot of information that has come out because of this hack. I don't want
Yeah.
to talk about too much of it, and I won't be talking about anything to do with the Wolverine game,
Yeah.
because I don't think you should be seeing or hearing any of that at this time. And as far as I'm concerned, the developers of that game and the developers of any game that leaks ever,
They get their time to show it off.
they should have their time and their moment to show it. One thing I will talk about though, because it's something that upsets me, but also kind of sheds some light on where the industry is and where certain parties in the industry are. Um, there was obviously a lot of Sony documents that also leaked with this stuff. I'm going to start on some of the interesting ones, and then I'll go to the sadder ones a little bit later on. But one of the things that leaked is how Sony have been viewing Microsoft and Xbox recently, and I don't know if you saw this one, Jeff, but I found this one quite interesting, of the internal document of where they see
Yeah,
Xbox as a threat and how in certain moves that Xbox and Microsoft have made, Sony are actually planning to completely follow their lead, and in other ways they're not going to do what Microsoft and Xbox are doing.
yeah. They
I
mentioned that they were kind of scared that Microsoft was going to leapfrog them this generation because Microsoft now has a built-in like PC store, essentially just there, a
yeah,
mobile, focus on like mobile market. Like Xbox is like everyone has been so concerned with like basically um, Sony making essentially playing it safe and being and doing their prestige gaming and whatnot, where they're essentially playing like standard chess. Microsoft over here so far has been playing like 3D chess
yeah,
and like manipulating the board in such a way that if they can pull this off, it's massive
yeah,
for them.
absolutely,
Like
and
financially, not just Xbox games,
yeah,
but Xbox
and
as a whole ecosystem.
and I think that that's something I've been trying to get across to my friends recently about how I don't understand why people are still trying to view Xbox as just the console, because that isn't what they've been for years now. And yet, for
No,
some reason, it seems like the more general public and the general gamer isn't able to even comprehend that they are now going for this ecosystem focus of, yes, console is part of our offering, it's not necessarily the most important part anymore, and actually we're trying to tackle gaming from all sides. Um,
it's like it's the same thought process where someone thinks of Google as just the search engine,
yeah, yeah, that's true.
right? Because they're also like a streaming platform, they're a music platform, they're like you can like watch movies and TVs and all that and all
Yeah,
that stuff on Google. But
that's really
everyone's like
true, actually.
the the search engine,
That's
like
really true.
that's exactly what it is
So,
like
I want
Google
to
like
ask you before I carry on expanding on some of this stuff.
yeah.
When, when or how long do you think it takes for that perception to change, and for the reality to kind of hit people of Microsoft and Xbox aren't even playing the same game anymore?
Well, if you take a look at like the news report just came out that Sony is essentially outselling Xbox 3-1. Yeah, if you
Yeah,
look at the
this.
financials, Xbox is like right up there and like almost kicking their ass in a lot of ways.
Well, they made
I
more
think when
profit
Mike,
than them the last 2 years, right?
yeah, and for being outsold 3-1,
Yeah,
like can you imagine when they're not being outsold 3-1?
yeah,
So I think the perception changes when Microsoft either hits that 2-1 or 1-1, or they leapfrog them and they're the market leader.
yeah.
I think people are going to go like, oh, oh
and I,
shit, yeah,
and I
they
think
have been doing
I
it.
think the other thing as well that that will probably become clear to people is that when Sony start following Microsoft's way of business in gaming, which we've seen from these documents that they are planning to do in many ways. Like, I think that in
And
these
Sony's been a
documents,
follower for years
yeah,
because I don't think they were even the first controller to have vibration. I don't think they were the first one to have a camera. I don't think they were the first one to do like the move like things. Like
mhm,
they've
mhm,
been a they've been following trends. They have
yeah,
rarely ever been a
and
trendsetter.
and and that's what I find interesting, right? Because in these leaked documents, a few things we did see is that they are heavily considering day one releases to PC at some point over the next few years. They are also considering doing their own mobile store, which is something we know that Xbox is working on. Um,
Oh, yeah, I mean, they've got the content.
so, and but what I mean is, I think that that's something that will also change the perception, right? Because once the competition follows, so say their lesser competition, surely at that point people have to go, well, they're following them for a reason. They're doing something right. Um, One thing I did find interesting in those same kind of strategy documents is they talked about how they're still not convinced that with subscription services you can actually do them in a sustainable way. But I understand their point, and we'll get to why I think they think that is shortly with some of the other things that came out. But at this point, I think Xbox have kind of proven that you can. Like, we know that it's
Yeah.
profitable. We
Even the
know,
Lies of P developer was like, this was win-win. Like he
yeah.
just posted that.
So I don't really know where they're coming from. But then we obviously had the massive leak of the cost of the development of many of their games. I
Yeah.
won't go into details about those costs, but let's just say that some of them are very astronomical, right? Some of them are astronomical costs. And that brings me to the sad part of this entire leak, and the part that I think does deserve to be spoken about. And that is that apparently Sony are asking most of their studios to cut staff, and they've actually gone as far as asking Insomniac to cut between 50 and 75 staff,
Mhm.
which is a lot of people from one studio. And not only that, but as part of this leak, there was a document found which was notes from a November 9th meeting, so just over a month ago, that basically said they're considering shutting down one of their first party studios, but nobody knows which studio it is,
Was
and they haven't
was
made
that
any
the
comment.
was that the one that just shut out the shutting down at the end of the year that did the Fire
No, they're
Ultra
not, because they're
VR?
not first party.
No? Oh, okay. I just
So,
saw that one and I'm like, oh wait a minute, that was the
yeah,
PSVR game.
because
Maybe that was that one.
I saw that announcement yesterday that that
Yeah.
studio was shutting down, and I thought the same. But then when I looked into them, they're not actually a
Yeah.
first party studio. So,
Mm.
and this stuff makes me sad because look, I love PlayStation games. I think they do something that is unique. I think they hit a production level that not many video games do. But they're also doing that at a cost that is not sustainable,
Yeah.
seemingly, and that is costing people their jobs, and it potentially is going to result in one of many beloved studios shutting down, and it's like,
In 50 to 75 jobs, like because I think the Horizon team, I think Gorilla is like 300 people.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So when you cut 75 jobs,
Well, I
that's a
mean,
huge chunk. Like it's different if it's Ubisoft and you have 1,000 people making Assassin's Creed or like cut 50 jobs. Like
yeah.
that still sucks, but it's not a massive percentage of the studio.
I think that Insomniac, and I could be wrong, maybe you can check this, Jeff, but I think that Insomniac has around 400 employees. Um,
But they're
and
working on 3 games right
and
now.
and so 75 staff, we're looking at potentially near a quarter of their staff. Like,
Yeah.
that's a lot. Put it this way, there are some AAA games that are made with less than 75 core staff. Like, that's what I want to put in perspective for people. Um, it's really, really disheartening stuff, and I think that, yeah, okay, there's a lot of interesting information that came out with this leak. And PlayStation, are taking a different direction very clearly going forward. And I think that they're trying to kind of cut back a bit on what they've previously been doing, because they probably realize that it's not as sustainable as they thought. Because the issue they're having right now, right, is that a game is having to sell 4 million units or 5 million units before it even makes back the development cost half the time. And that is, that's just something that isn't really always going to be possible. And it's just, I don't know. It's a strange situation to be in for a company like that have just sold 50 million PlayStation 5s. You know, they've had the biggest, I think they've had one of the biggest individual selling years of a console outside of a launch year ever. They
Yeah.
sold they sold 10 million consoles just between July and now. That, like, it's incredible, right? That's why this year specifically they have outsold Xbox 3 to 1, or that is what the estimates would tell you. um I would
Yeah, I think
suggest I would suggest that that number is a little bit closer than people think it is, because, you know, these estimates are basically put together by people who have access to retail information from high
yeah.
street stores, but they don't necessarily know how many consoles are sold on Amazon, and they certainly don't know how many consoles are sold directly from Microsoft, right? So
Yeah.
I would
And
suggest,
Microsoft just put the Xbox Series X down for like $100 cheaper or something like that too.
yeah, they've started to do their sales now as well, right? Like PlayStation, we've seen over in Europe, they've actually had the consoles on a discounted price for about 6 months now. Um, and I know that part of that was because they said that in the UK specifically, the PlayStation 5 wasn't meeting their sales expectations. Um,
Yeah.
we are seeing Xbox start to put the price down now as well. But I want to put something in perspective for people about sales while we're on the subject. As far as we know, we don't get official reports from Xbox on sales numbers, but the one thing they keep saying, and they've been saying all generation, is that it's their fastest selling console ever. So, yes, they might be getting outsold. I believe that the current assumption is that the gap is around 22 million consoles in total in Sony's favor. So they might be getting outsold by 20 to 22 million consoles, but they're still their own best selling console ever. And they're, I think at the start of this year, they were beating the Xbox 360 by 6 million consoles sold at the time. So they,
Hmm.
and if they end up 6 million ahead of the Xbox 360 sales at the end of the generation, that means they're looking at a machine that's on course to sell potentially up to 90 million consoles. How can anyone consider that a failure? The only reason that people do is because they don't report the numbers. And I think that in some ways, that's a big mistake on Microsoft's behalf of not reporting the actual numbers. I can
Like,
understand it because you don't want to report them when you're losing and when you're
yeah,
losing by such a big margin. But when you're doing better than you've ever done, not only in console sales but in the gaming space generally, I think they don't shout about it enough. And
I think
therefore,
once they kind of bridge the gap like a little bit tighter or start to like
yeah.
level out, I think
Well,
you'll start to see
well, it's like
like more of that
one of
report.
the things we know now. One of the things we know now is that if the estimates are correct, is that the gap changed this year by about 12 million consoles, which means before Sony's sales this year, they were a lot closer in sales. They were pretty close. They were like, 4 PlayStation 5s to 3 Xboxes. And that's
Yeah.
pretty close. Like,
Again, too, like I think they might not be reporting like unit sales too, because again, like that pulls into that like Xbox as a console narrative. Whereas you take a look at things like whether it's like Sea of Thieves or Forza Horizon when they're reporting like 24 million people have like played
yeah.
the game.
Yeah.
So it kind of puts in perspective that they're more focused on combining PC and Xbox as a
Well,
as a
it's
number.
like they reported, because I was doing a bit of research recently, and they reported last year that they have 120 million monthly active users on Xbox as an ecosystem, right? So that means
Yeah.
across PC, mobile, cloud, and console, they're being
Yeah.
used by 120 million people a month. That's a lot of people. I just think
Yeah,
that
you might say that's 3-1 over PlayStation.
it's just like
It's Jim Ryan crying like,
it's.
"120
So I
million."
think that the point the point I'm trying to make here is that ultimately they're playing very different games,
Mm-hmm.
but the problem is they're still on the same chessboard because the perception is when people hear Xbox, and this is where I think it comes from. When people hear Xbox, they still think of the console. They don't think of this gaming ecosystem because Xbox is the name of a console, right? And this is why I think Microsoft are actually being quite smart because they've created Microsoft Gaming. And I think going forward, like we saw on the end of the Blade trailer that they uploaded to the Xbox channel, it said Microsoft on the end of the trailer. I think they're going to start talking about it as Microsoft Gaming rather than Xbox specifically because I think that people look at Xbox specifically as just the console and they're trying to make it this ecosystem thing, but that's hard to do when there's such a heavy brand association to a certain hardware, right?
Yeah.
It's um and my thoughts are with all the people that work at PlayStation Studios currently because again, I want to these cuts of staff are ridiculous. I understand why they're making them. And I think that for anyone who looks into the cost of their video games will understand the same thing. But yeah, we saw recently that the Last of Us Online project got cancelled. Part of that, I know they won't say it in their official thing, but I can almost guarantee you that part of that was cost cutting. Because we know that they'd slimmed down the team that were working on that anyway. So it's very, very, very sad times for the industry. And there is one more bit of sad news before we get into our happy main topic. So do you want to talk
Hold up,
about
I've
that?
got one sad one and one happy one.
Okay, so let's do the
So,
happy one first because we just did a sad one. So
okay. I was saying if you wanted to end on a happy one,
oh, okay,
that'd
all
be
right
good.
then, all right. So
All
we'll
right.
do the sad
So,
one first.
anyone who has been a fan of Remedy games probably knows now that James McCaffrey, who has been the voice of Max Payne, has passed away. He
Yeah,
was 65. The actor died. Now, he's not just Max Payne. He's been in tons of TV shows and movies and stuff. He was in Rescue Me. Um, the actor died on Sunday at his home in Larchmont, New York, having diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a form of blood cancer. His wife, Rachel Bostrom, has confirmed. McCaffrey was perhaps best known as the voice of Max Payne. He played the character in all three Max Payne games. He then also kind of brought back the character's voice as Alex Casey in Alan Wake 2. Um, McCaffrey has also stated that he's never been a fan of video games. He's never played the Max Payne games or anything like that. He's lacked the proper appreciation for video games. End quote. Despite this, he's also voiced Thomas Zane in the 2010 game Alan Wake, when Alex Casey in the Alan Wake 2. He's also provided voices in other games as well too, through Area 51, Alone in the Dark, and he is survived by his wife and daughter. Um, Now, this is obviously it's too soon to know how his impact is going to affect Remedy in the future, especially with future content for Alan Wake 2. But yeah, it sucks because a lot of people probably don't know the name, but they know the voice. Like
yeah.
they know Max Payne's voice. It kind of
It's
he was
such an
a kind
iconic
of a genre
voice,
leader.
right? It's such an
Yeah,
iconic voice, and yeah, it's one of those where it's like when you're for example, we haven't had a Max Payne game for many, many years now, but when you hear that voice again in Alan Wake 2, and you understand what they're doing because Sam Lake is the face of the character in Alan Wake, so it's very clearly a callback to Max Payne himself. But when you hear that voice, it's just so iconic. And, he's worked with Remedy on nearly every game, I think, except for Quantum Break. And so he is, just, yeah, he will be massively missed, especially going into the Max Payne 1 and 2 remake that we know that Remedy are working on as well. So I'll be interested to see what they do with that, because again, he's so iconic and so ingrained with that character that I don't think people will want another voice, no matter who it is, and it made me think, when I heard of his passing, it made me think of Lance Reddick earlier this year as well, who also passed away. And he was so iconic as Zavala in Destiny. And
I still remember that line. It's like, we'll start taking them out one by one. Like, that whole line to me is just like, that's one of the most iconic lines in Destiny.
yeah, and so it's really, really sad. And also, I think the timing of James McCaffrey's passing is also really kind of like sad, and just a reminder that we never know what's going to happen in life. Like, this guy just released, or just was part of, one of the biggest releases of the year in terms of critical success. Alan Wake 2 picks up many awards at the Game Awards. McCaffrey wasn't nominated. I actually think there's an argument that he could have been nominated for his performance. And yeah, he'll be. I think he'll be remembered very, very fondly by all video game fans, because, as you said, Jeff, he was a genre leader, right? And he made a difference to voice acting in video games. He was one of those early sort of real pioneers that showed what could be done with voice acting in video games. So he will be sorely missed for sure. What is this final news piece that we have then, Jeff?
So I'll speed through it just to kind of make it like a headline piece so we can get to our top 10 here. But Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick will officially be leaving the company on December 9th. It's been confirmed. That's all we need to say. Goodbye, Bobby. I'd say happy trails, but no.
Yes, yes.
Just stumbled down those trails.
I would add one little thing here. As a result of this, there are actually other people leaving Activision as well. Some of the main positions. But that's because they're becoming more heavily integrated with Microsoft. And we've also seen, as part of this, a slightly more restructuring of Microsoft gaming, which they've been doing over the last couple of months, as they've
I'm looking at the name changes, and like, there's just tons. Like, a lot of it's basically just going to be reporting to, I think, Matt Booty.
Yeah. So we've had official confirmation that Matt Booty will now also be overseeing Activision, which worries me slightly, because one person having so much responsibility isn't necessarily a good thing. And I do think, to be fair, to his credit, since Matt Booty has been in charge of Xbox Game Studios, he actually did a very good job. He got them to a very good, very consistent place. But doing that across essentially 3 publishers now is going to be quite hard. But what we have seen is, and I forget the guy's name, but the person who was previously running the Forza franchise is now head of Xbox Game Studios. So he's taken Matt Booty's previous position. They've got someone named Jill, I forget her name, I think it's Jill Braff, who has come in as the head of ZeniMax Bethesda. And she'll be leading the development studios over there, and she'll be reporting.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the name here because this one's just talking about the stuff in relation to Activision Blizzard.
Yeah, as part of that, like I said, Matt Booty's overseeing it. They're all reporting to Phil. Um, Bethesda ZeniMax basically has a new person leading their group individually as well, and I would suspect that somebody will eventually be put in place to lead the ABK stuff on the day to day underneath Matt Booty. Right now, we don't know who that person is though, um, and you know it remains to be seen. But at this point, you know, I think I saw a thing yesterday that like Microsoft now own 38 game studios, and okay, you can kind of take some of those away because I think Activision had something like 6 support studios, and then
Yeah.
you've got and like and then you've got more external development support like web services and things like that. But in terms of actual core development studios, I think they have something like 32 or 33. So it's going to be interesting to see how they manage all this stuff. But the one positive that we knew was guaranteed is Bobby has gone, right? And this is something I've actually
Yeah, it's
seen.
1 week from now. 1 week from what we're recording
Yeah,
is that Bobby will leave
and
the company.
I've
I mean, he
actually
gets a golden
seen
parachute, but
I've actually seen ABK staff celebrating this as well. So
yeah, one girl like the demon has left or something like that.
yeah, so you know, I've spoken before about how there were a lot of guaranteed positives of this acquisition, but they weren't necessarily things that the gamer had to worry about or that would directly impact the gamer. But I guarantee you that things like this are things that will impact the games that are delivered, right? Because when you see staff celebrating that someone like that is gone, they're probably going to work better and harder than they did before. So I'm so pleased for all of them, and I can't wait to
Yeah,
see what the future holds for them.
there was some news about like an aggressive remote working type of process that changed, but I don't know if that was Activision's last little thing or Microsoft.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure because we've had confirmation that they're still integrating at the moment. They're not fully integrated. Um, Interestingly, what we also had confirmation of is that ZeniMax Bethesda will remain only partially integrated as they have been this whole time. So it sounds like they're integrating ABK into Microsoft further than they have with Bethesda and ZeniMax. That would suggest to me that maybe they didn't trust the leadership of ABK to actually run the company very well. um,
Probably.
so I'm interested to see how that all goes. But I think now it's time to actually celebrate some very good games this year, Jeff, and get to our top tens. So why don't you start? And I guess we should go from 10 to 1. But do you have any honourable mentions? That's the first question.
Oh yeah, I forgot to post those on there. Um, I would say I'm just going through my other list here and stuff like that. I really liked Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora.
Go and read
Um,
Jeff's
I
review now.
I I quite enjoyed it. I went into it entirely blind, so I had no expectations other than it being an Ubisoft game. Um, Other ones and stuff like that, like I really liked Dave the Diver. I also liked Showgunners if you're looking for like a XCOM style game with a little bit of like over the top TV, Smash TV type of thing and stuff like that. I think Jedi Survivor didn't get enough love as well too. I think that was actually quite good. Um, but other than that, maybe like Tears of the Kingdom as well is another one that I would toss in there for honorable mention because like I did enjoy it. It still has kind of like excluded some of the things that I really love about the Legend of Zelda series, although it did capitalize on them far more than Breath of the Wild. I still want full themed dungeons, and they kind of pulled that off with Tears of the Kingdom to a certain degree, because Breath of the Wild had none of that. Um, but that's probably it for my honorable mentions. If
Nice.
we do end up talking about some of the games we've been playing after we've got time, I will talk about one of the other ones.
I do.
If not, I'll
I
talk about it
do
the next
have.
time.
Before you get to your 10th place game, I might as well do my honourable mentions now.
Yeah, go for it.
Um, I have two mainly, and both of these games are only honourable mentions because I haven't played enough of them to put them in my list.
Yeah.
But I think that if I had played more of each game, they probably would both make my list, and that is Tears of the Kingdom. I thought was a really good game. It had that, that unique. Well, I say unique. It had that physics system which was made part of the game in a way that we haven't really seen before in gaming, and that meant that people could do things that was truly in their way. And I remember scaling a mountain with basically some logs stuck together that I would just prop up and keep climbing up, and you could do some really cool stuff in there. The other one is Baldur's Gate 3, because obviously I was waiting for the Xbox version which came out a week and a bit ago. Um I've been really enjoying it, and I see why it is a game that will be on many, many people's lists, and actually probably in the top two or three for most people that have played it, right? Um, and I think it would be there for me if I had played more of the game. However, having not even played 10 hours yet of a game that I know can be well over 100 hours long, I don't feel comfortable putting it in my list. If I had played 50 hours, then I may be more inclined to do so. But I don't
You'd be about
think.
halfway through Act Two
but
at
I
50 hours.
but yeah, I don't think that 10 hours is quite enough. But what I will say is the reason it makes my honorable mentions is from that sort of up to 10 hours so far, I can see every single thing that every person says about the game, and I believe that every single thing that everybody says is true. Um, it's a wonderful video game, and I really do recommend that as many people play it as possible. So, with that being said, Jeff, what is
Hmm.
your number 10?
Number 10. It's gonna be Spider-Man 2, for me. Like, I really liked it. I think, like, there are some things about Insomniac's take on Spider-Man that I'm not 100% in love with. I don't like his new facial model. I didn't even like the previous one. To me, it's not a good-looking Peter Parker.
For full
But the
disclosure, I've only played so far 3 hours of Spider-Man 2. So,
Yeah. Yeah, like Spider-Man 2's got some fantastic characters. Their take on Miles is fantastic. How they handled Craven and Venom here is just absolutely well done. Like there's like the first moment Spider-Man like kind of beats Craven, that moment is just like you haven't got there yet, so I'll dance around it. But it's just like extremely threatening to kind of see what Craven can kind of bring to that encounter. But the game itself is great. I still like it would score higher on this list if it was a bit more streamlined, like the Miles Morales game, where it didn't
okay,
feel like there was so much filler in the open
that
world,
makes
because it
sense to
still
me.
has that problem.
That makes sense to me
Like,
because just from the little bit that I've played, The one thing
Yeah.
that has put me off going back to the game so far is that open world. And to admit, I am a bit fatigued on open worlds right now, especially open worlds of that style. But it
Well,
has
and
so much filler in it that that's quite
yeah,
off-putting.
like my biggest issue is New York as a video game location is just fucking done.
Yeah,
It's so overdone. You take a look at the New York that is in Miles Morales, and it's just packed full of Christmas. How many open world New York cities have taken place during Christmas?
Division,
Name two.
Division is the
Is that New York?
the first Division was New York.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so there's been what, two? But I mean, like this one, the New York that was in the Miles Morales game was way more entertaining than it was in Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. I just find New York absolutely boring as a location. I'm sure it's great for people to live there. We're like, that's my house. Like, great. Okay.
I
But as a
agree with
video
you
game
because
location,
I
it's so
actually I
overdone.
actually think that many locations are overdone in video games, and I
That's
think
why
that
I'm so excited that Blade's going to take place in Paris
yeah,
because it's an open world that we've had very little of. I mean,
yeah,
I think Watch Dogs, I think, is
and
about the only one
it's
that
like
plays there.
that's why I liked, you know, that's why I do like the occasional video game that we see in London, right? In terms of open world, because we've had Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which was Victorian London, so completely
Yeah,
different. And then we had Watch Dogs 2, no, Watch Dogs
Legion.
Legion. Yeah, Watch Dogs Legion, which took place in modern day or slightly futuristic London.
Yeah.
But as someone who is British, and maybe this is just me being British, but I do think Britain isn't used enough as a video game location. And maybe that's because most developers are American, but I just think there's so much, you know, you could use Britain, you can use loads of places in Europe, you can use places in Canada. There's so much variation in
Yeah.
locations.
I mean,
Why do they
with
stick
Spider-Man, you
why do they stick to,
yeah.
like you're saying, New York, LA, Miami? That's kind of it.
See, I don't think it's too much of an issue that it is New York. I think it's the biggest issue is that they don't do enough to make New York interesting
Hmm.
as a video game location. The Christmas setting was fantastic because it gave you something else to visually kind of look at. And sure, you have some areas that are affected by Sandman and stuff and whatnot, but it's just not enough. And like
Yeah.
again, it would score higher if those complaints that I had were not
Yeah.
present because
And
like the game
also,
itself is very good.
I guess the other thing is that this is the third game we've had. I know that this map is slightly expanded, but this is the third game that we've now had on the same map,
Yeah.
right? And
And well, kind of. They expanded with a bunch of territories, but there's still like an area that you can see across like a river
yeah,
that is still not explorable, and you can see it. So it's still not all of New York. And I don't know if like Spider-Man 3, Spider Island, or whatever they're going to be doing for the next one, because there's rumors that it's a multiplayer game, is going to expand upon that. I have no idea because I don't think you can even get out to the Statue of Liberty. I don't
interesting,
think, and I'm
interesting.
not 100% too sure, but we'll move on here because like Spider-Man 2, great. It hits my number 10.
Yes.
But Jordan, your number 10.
Oh, my number 10. So my number 10, I want to kind of caveat slightly that it was it was a game that I played and I really enjoyed that I think will get better over time, but the reason it made my list is because for me it's the best game in its series so far, and that is Forza Motorsport. Um and firstly I want to talk about, just from an accessibility point of view, I think it's the most accessible video game I've ever seen. Um, like you can literally play this game if you're blind. Like it's 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 incredible. But and I know that people have issues with Forza Motorsport, right? I know that there are people who will say, "Why have they done this car RPG thing? It's silly," or I just want to be able to progress the way that I always used to, which is earn money and be able to buy every single car part as soon as I have enough money for it. I
Yeah.
understand all of that. I actually found the RPG element to it way more interesting and way more engaging because it gave me a reason to keep using the same car and upgrade that car and make it feel like my car. And every time I'd have a new car, it felt like creating a new character in RPG. It, to me, for the more casual player that I am of this kind of racing game, it just kept me way more engaged. And yes, is there somewhat limited content? Yeah, I'd agree with that. But this is also a half live service game, if you will, where they have said they will continue to update it over time. I think they've added now. We're what 2 months after release, and they've added like 4 or 5 tracks already. They've added numerous cars as well. So there is going to be new content in this game as it goes forward for years to come. They've said they want it to be a platform game, right? Which is different to what GT7 did. Um, and I know that, there's the argument that it didn't look as good visually as people expected, being a next gen only game and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, for me, the reason it makes this list is the part that is most important in these video games, which is the gameplay for this kind of simulation game, felt better than any racing sim that I've played before. And I'm not saying that that means it's the most accurate simulation. I don't think it is. But in terms of the customizability of the experience and being able to make it feel the way I want it to feel and enjoy it every single race, this is the
Mhm.
best one, and it plays better than any Forza before, in my opinion, and therefore that's why it makes number 10 on my list this year.
All right. All right. So we'll head to number 9.
Yeah, what do you have at
Number
number
9 for
9?
me is Dead Space Remake. Um, this is a fantastic remake. From sounds to visuals to overhauling certain things, like they made the Ishimura like a traversal space in terms of like making it one large location instead of just segmented story chapters, so you could go back and retrack and all that stuff. The ability of like cutting the power to get something and then that brings out the spooks. Like the way that they built this remake is a tremendous achievement, especially since like it was an entirely different team. This was EA Motive. They were working on some Star Wars games before. Um, they were extremely transparent during development, showing all sorts of stuff. And this game is utterly fantastic. The original voice, I believe, for Isaac Clarke came back, and he has a voice in this one as opposed to he only had a voice in Dead Space 2. So they brought him back. This game is fantastic. It looks incredible. It plays incredible, and honestly, it is just one of the best remakes this year.
I actually started playing it recently, and I will be going back to it, but I'm playing something else at the minute for review. Um, but yeah, I agree with you. From what I've played, kind of very early on in the game, it looks incredible. It's really well made, and I think the other thing is it sort of caught people off guard because I think that most people weren't expecting it to be as good as it was. Um, and I love it when a game does that. When a game catches people off guard, I love it. Uh, there's another similar game that's on my list. We'll talk about that one later. But my number 9 is the only game that I could have finished that I haven't finished. But the reason it's on my list is it made such a lasting impression on me that it's a game that I talk about every single week. And it's a game that I think of every single week. And that is Hi Fi Rush. Hi Fi Rush for me was, first of all, it created one of the best moments of the year in terms of Shadow Drop at a developer
Mhm.
direct and being the quality of game that it was incredible. It has such a, well, I say a unique art style. I would say a unique visual style for a video game is what it has, and then it uses audio, being a rhythm based game, in in as such a part of the gameplay and the core experience, which is something I love. Right, I I used to want to be a composer. That was kind of my first thing in life. So anything audio that does interesting stuff is always going to impress me, and I played a bit more of Hi-Fi Rush last night because I wanted to try and play more of it to see where I should put it on my list. The only reason it's as low as it is every game above it is a game that I've fully finished or that I cannot finish because of the nature of the game. Um, but yeah, I do think this is one of the best games to release this year, and I think that from most people who've played it would probably agree with that. I think it probably gets hurt by the fact that it was released so early in the year. So people have
Yeah.
kind of. I think that some people think
Well,
it.
and also what year we've had,
Yeah, that's true. Um,
like
but yeah, I would just say, look, if you haven't played it, it's on Game Pass, both on PC and on Xbox. Please go and give it a try because it's one of the most unique games I've played this year. And I don't know if you'd really describe it as AAA because it was made by a smaller team, but it's probably the most AAA like rhythm game that I've ever played. Um, and that was really interesting to see.
I would definitely consider it AAA because it does have the money behind Microsoft. It's a little bit different with Dave the Diver, where like the team that had it didn't have a AAA budget.
Yeah,
Like they didn't have
yeah.
a like they have the company behind it, like
Well,
knock on that
that's why I
wood,
said I wasn't really
does
sure
have money, but
because in my head I would because it's a Microsoft game, but then at the
yeah.
same time it was made by such a smaller team that it's kind
Yeah,
of
I don't think the size of team for me doesn't really affect whether it's indie. I think indie depends whether or not it is essentially independent, like the studio.
I
I
agree.
think it has
I
that
agree.
indie like feel.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's well,
All right. So
it's kind of like a game that would have made my list last year, Pentiment, right? That's a similar
yeah.
situation. So, what do you have at number 8, Jeff?
Number 8 is Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty.
Oh,
Um,
can I just interject for a second? Just because
yeah.
a slight spoiler, and I don't want to talk about this game twice. That is my number 7. So,
Cool. Well, we'll be talking about Hi-Fi Rush for my end of it in a bit. So Phantom Liberty, jumping back in and having to respec all my stuff, I hated that because it was so intimidating with all the changes that they made. But Phantom Liberty kind of pulls from a lot of different sci-fi in regards to kind of fueling its story because you get that moment that's almost like right out of Ghost in the Shell, the animated, like the first movie, where you have this big freaking tank and then all these pillars and stuff, and you're trying to essentially stop it. That part was great. I ended up going for the ending that puts you back out into the world where you can then go and do the other endings. There is another ending that kind of like cuts off to have its own ending. I didn't go that route, but it was fantastic. Like I really liked. Everyone was talking about like Idris Elba and like his um his type of thing. Um, and Songbird to me was a way more compelling character than Idris Elba's than it was Elba's character. Um, yeah, this game was just like this update was fantastic. It
yeah,
added a tremendous amount. It overhauled everything.
yeah,
But the Phantom Liberty stuff it is just tremendous
yeah,
and it's great. Like it is. I loved Cyberpunk 2077 when it came out. I barely had any issues. It was my
Yeah,
game of the year. I loved that game. And Phantom Liberty to me is just like it took that game and just made it better.
yeah. So the way I would summarize it is that Phantom Liberty is the game that Cyberpunk should have been at launch for everybody. Um, I I do think there is some weight behind the fact that not only is this a great expansion in terms of the story you're playing through and things that happen there, but this is also an update that made significant changes to the actual already existing game, and therefore, it holds a little bit more weight for me, and that's why it made my number 7. Um, However, I'll now talk about my number 8 because this is a game that made my list that I knew I was going to enjoy, but I didn't expect it to make my list when I first started playing it. And that is Assassin's Creed Mirage. Um, and my reasoning behind this is simply that it felt like an Assassin's Creed game again. It felt like Assassin's Creed was well and truly back, and I played it the way that I played old Assassin's Creed games, which is exactly what I want out of the franchise. It kind of nailed exactly everything I wanted it to do. I know that for some people, they might argue that it was too far of a step back, but I think taking that far of a step back, in my opinion, was actually a good thing because it now allows them to, if they want to keep this style moving forward for some of the games, they can look and build on it from where they are now rather than trying to go back to like, let's be Black Flag again and then building from there, because that's sort of after that was where things started to go a little bit wrong. um and the other thing I loved about it was a nice condensed experience that didn't feel too short or too long. um and yeah, it
Yeah,
just I really really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed every
I think
second
if
of
the
playing it.
story I think if the story was more captivating for me, it would probably be on my list because I really did enjoy it. Odyssey is still going to be my favorite. I
Yeah.
think forever. I don't think any Assassin's Creed is going to top that. Um, but yeah, no, the Mirage is quite good.
So obviously my number 7 was Cyberpunk, so I don't need to speak about that. But what was your number 7, Jeff?
My number 7 is what is it? Diablo 4.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay.
Diablo 4 is fantastic. I really enjoyed the story. I loved just like playing that in co-op. I even loved the live service elements that they added with all of the dangerous areas that you can kind of go in. Um, yeah, it was just so much fun playing Diablo again. I do wish it still had the dodge roll because that's the one thing I liked about Wolcen that came out this year. Um, but no, Diablo 4 is just great. I mean, the microtransactions are what they are. I mean, that's just the nature of kind of where that's going.
Lovely,
But
lovely.
yeah, like the game was super fun to play. Visually, it was absolutely gorgeous. And yeah, it's just I really enjoyed playing that game, whether it was just solo or whether with my roommate or whatever. But no, absolutely fantastic game. It really kicked ass.
I'm quiet because I'll talk more about Diablo 4 later on. However, for now, I'm going to talk about my number 6, which is a game that it's a DLC expansion that I almost forgot about because I thought it came out last year. It was just very early this year, and that is Hitman Freelancer. And for those of you that don't know, the reason I debated whether to put Freelancer on my list or not because it is technically a mode that just uses everything that already exists in the game. However, the reason it's on my list is it's a mode that completely changes the way you play Hitman and the way you even think about Hitman, because it's basically a roguelike. You take your gear, you go into a mission, and if you die, you lose whatever you're carrying for the most part, right? Things you pick up in the mission you can bring back with you, all this kind of stuff, and it escalates as you go through different missions. They become harder, but you get greater rewards. You find different one-time items in the maps and stuff like that. So the maps are maps that you know, and they're maps from all of the three recent Hitman games. But because you're playing them in a different way with different tools available to you, the way that you play the game entirely changes. And because there is that risk of losing everything you've got, or using an item that you don't necessarily want to use immediately, it's like, it's really, I said it to you, Jeff. I actually think that this mode was so impressive, it could have been a standalone game, because it's basically Hitman the roguelike. That's what it
Yeah.
is. Um, and therefore that's why it made my list. I think it was one of the most fun things that I played this year. I reviewed it for Outer Haven. I believe I gave it 5 out of 5. I would have actually have given the original Hitman 3 5 out of 5 as well. I was very impressed by that game, but what they've built with that entire, what they're calling the world of assassination now, I think is really really impressive. And to add a mode onto that completely changes the way you think and play the game, it was so impressive to me. So it had to make my list. What was your number 6, Jeff?
My number 6 was Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush is excellent. Visually, it's great. I jumped into it blind when I got home. I only saw the cover art because I heard it was blowing up, and then I went and installed it. And the moment you step out and you see that entire world like all done up, I'm like, oh my God, this is gorgeous. And like all the characters were fantastic. The story beats were great. I only had one issue with the game, and that was just like some of those rhythm games that the timing was just weird on one of the last ones.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's an absolutely tremendous game. And to come from a studio that's generally known for horror,
Hmm.
that was another big one. I mean, there were little nods to The Evil Within and Evil Within 2 as well too, if you played it. But yeah, Hi-Fi Rush is gorgeous. It plays extremely well, and it is just an entertaining game from start to finish with some excellent music, amazing combat, and I hope to see a sequel,
Well,
maybe
I feel
allowing us
like
to play as other characters.
that's what I was just gonna say. I feel like this is a game that has started a franchise, right? Like this isn't the only Hi-Fi Rush game that we're going to see,
Yeah,
because these
I think even if they had the
characters,
second one co-op,
because
that would
the
be interesting.
because these characters and this world is too interesting, and it's like, even when we get the small cutscenes that are in the game, they look so
Yeah.
impressive to me because of the visual style, that I'm really engaged, more so than I am in many, many other games. Yeah, it was very impressive. I agree with you. And that moment, like you said, when you first step out and you kind of see everything, that was great. That was great. So I'm on to my number 5, which is,
How did you jump ahead?
because if you remember, I did my number 7 at the same time you were doing your number 8, because my number 7
Oh,
was
right.
Cyberpunk.
Okay, so you're number 5.
So my number 5 is technically, I guess you could say, one of my favorites of all time, because the original was one of my favorites of all time.
Oh, you put Alan Wake so low.
And
I'm surprised.
this remade version is actually better than the original in my opinion, and that is Resident Evil 4 remake. Um, just
Well,
in
spoilers, that's my number 5 as well. So let's dive into Resident Evil 4 remake.
That's interesting. Um, I just I don't know what more to say than what we've said in the past on the podcast, other than they've made one of the best survival horror games of all time better. And I don't know really how else to explain how I feel about the game. So what would you say on it, Jeff?
Well, I mean, they Resident Evil 4 was always a game that people said didn't need to be remade. Yet with all of the people kind of claiming that, Some of the most played versions of Resident Evil 4 recently have been like the mod packs for 4, whether it's like the high definition type of thing. So people have been clamoring for some type of remade assets. And Capcom could have been lazy and they could have just essentially one-to-one this type of game, but they didn't. They expanded upon like the Louise character. They expanded upon changing the prison section at the very end, like that whole island essentially is just going to be completely redone. There's some segments in the game that they've just flipped, like
Mhm.
that one part where after the boulder, like it takes you to a completely different area. Now the village you traverse
Yeah.
it backwards.
But what I like as
They
well, what I like about that is that it starts off almost exactly the same though. So when you're first playing this game, it doesn't appear to be that different, and then there's more changes as you get deeper into the game. It
and
was a really
Leon's
clever
less
way of
problematic
doing
this time. It's great.
it.
Um, but yeah, like they did such a good job. Like, and I'll say like this is the best aside from my next game. This is the best shooting that we've had this year, especially in third person. The combat feels incredible. It is just so enjoyable to play this game. Every single weapon feels great. Every single like everything just feels so good in this game. Like even how you are like guiding like Ashley along, whether it's like having her stay in one spot or protecting her or anything like that is just fantastic. I haven't tried the Separate Ways DLC, so I mean they've added that and made that better. Um, all in all, like everything that they've done to this game has just made it better. Like to me, this is the definitive version of Resident Evil 4. It doesn't like make the other one suddenly disappear or anything like that. Like it's not Overwatch. It doesn't override, its predecessor
Yeah,
essentially.
I agree. And at the end of the day, look, the original Resident Evil 4 will always be one that changed video games forever. Like that will not no one can ever take away from Resident Evil 4 the original release that it literally changed video games forever. But
Yeah.
this is just a better version of that game which which reflects where we are today in terms of technology, and it means that people will be able to play this amazing game for so many more years to come, right? And this is why this game is exactly why I am a huge advocate for remakes. I think they have a massive place in video games. I think that video games, especially ones like Resident Evil 4, where they had a big impact on the industry, but they're potentially aged now, though all of those games deserve remakes. You know,
Mm.
everyone knows that my own personal one would be the first two Shenmue games. I would love to see those fully remade by Sega and, have a AAA budget of today and do see what they could do with that. But yeah, I loved Resident Evil 4 remake, and I do think at the end of the day they made an already fantastic game even better. So, there was no way I couldn't put it on my list. The only reason it's not higher is every game that is higher than this for me is one where the story connected with me more. That's literally the only reason. Um, but having said that, Jeff, you have now jumped ahead again. So what is
Yeah.
your number 4?
Sure. Let's check something. All right. So my number 4 is RoboCop Rogue City. Um, this game, my God, like I've never been a huge fan of RoboCop. It wasn't until Giant Bomb started doing the whole like RoboMitch stuff and then like doing like the watch along for the first film that I really kind of fell back into in enjoying RoboCop because like I watched them when I was younger. I read RoboCop comic books and all that kind of stuff. But Rogue City is to me one of the best licensed games ever made. It took the films. It takes place between the second and third film. and it just oozes that atmosphere. Like you get to like visit locations that were in the film to incredible detail. It's still one of the best looking like Unreal Engine 5 games. Like you'll see like most people are so focused on the people looking like shit that they don't take a look at the environments. Like that game is absolutely gorgeous. Watch the Digital Foundry breakdown on RoboCop Rogue City because holy hell. Um, they got Peter Weller back, so it's the first time he's played the character since the second film, and then he played some of the voice lines for the Mortal Kombat edition. But this is the first time he's come back to the character in a substantial way, because again, this is not canon, but it does take place between the second and third film, so it's not really an adaptation in the same sense, like where Insomniac took Spider-Man and then did their own thing. These guys, they kept it to work within the framework of the films, and so you get to see a lot of characters that you've seen before. You get to see some of the storylines kind of extend out, but the shooting in that game is so fun. Headshots, nut shots, everything that you're pulling off in that game looks great. The theme just blasting in your ear when you like open fire in that first like bank or whatever like that, like, and then shooting like the papers off the desk and shooting the environment and the pillars crumbling and grabbing someone and chucking them out the window. Um, that This game is just pure fun, and it is just it's fantastic. Like you
So,
change your gun to like not need to reload, so you're just like peppering like forever. And yeah, this is such a good game.
so ultimately, what Jeff is saying is this might be up for our best licensed game of the year potentially.
It's amazing.
um,
Like is Yeah, it's so good.
I can't wait to play it one day. I just haven't been able to pick it up yet. But from everything I've seen and from
On
everything
sale.
you've told
On
me,
sale on Xbox right now. I
I
think it's like
um
30% off.
I definitely want to play it. Like it does look like one of those that is just a ton of fun to play. Um, and also it's quite a visually impressive game in many ways, and that's something I enjoy.
Except for the people. Except for the people. I will stress though that the people like they don't look great. And I think that's just
so
like
so
it's a shame
so
because
it,
there's assets that they can pull for Unreal 5 to
are
make the
we
people
are
look
we
good.
sure that this isn't a Ubisoft game?
Probably. But yeah, like no, Ubisoft doesn't tackle like the games in that sort of I guess kind of passion towards their projects, I think, in the same way, because like these guys like they failed miserably with the Rambo game. They started to kind of hit their stride with the Terminator game, but RoboCop, like, I mean, you get RoboCop saying pickles like all the time because one of the informants' name is Pickles. So like hearing Peter Weller and going pickles, like it's just so funny. Yeah, that game is so good. Honestly, if you have a chance to play the demo on Steam, do it. It gives you a good chunk of game to play on that demo. If you do not like the demo, you will not like the game. They give you so much to play around with on that demo, and yeah, the shooting, the music, everything is so good, unbelievably good. And Peter Weller back in the role is definitely worth it.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I mean that alone is going to be a selling point for a lot of people, for
Yeah,
sure.
I hope they do a sequel. I hope they don't just jump into like Die Hard or something like that. Like,
I mean,
I
you
mean, they'll
say
probably
that, but
get Bruce
I
Willis,
would take a Die Hard game though. I really would take a Die Hard game. um,
yeah,
so that
but
being
yeah.
said,
What's your number four?
let's talk about my number four, shall we? And interestingly, my number four has a number four in it. Uh, that is Diablo 4. And the reason that this game is so high on my list, because I did consider putting it lower, because after the main campaign, once the game hit season 1, it sort of fell off a cliff for me a little bit. Um,
Yeah, I didn't touch season one at all. They're like, you have to remake your character, and then you remake the character, and they're like, hey, you,
yeah.
yeah, you saved us from the evil. No, this character definitely did not. My other character did, but
However,
I get why.
The reason that it's so high on my list is because I've tried three Diablo games at this point, including Diablo 4. Okay, so I've played 2 Remake and I played Diablo 3, and neither of those games grabbed me at all. I would enjoy playing them with friends, but that was about it, right? Diablo 4 made me interested in the actual lore of the world. I think it told a really interesting main story that I was actually watching every cutscene, listening to every line of dialogue, not skipping anything. I was doing the side quests because they built out the world and let you learn about characters even more. It was just so interesting to play, and I enjoyed every single moment of playing it on my own. I enjoyed playing it in co op with friends. I had a build that, I was a druid. I had a really strong druid build. Um, and I'm still learning things about Diablo and stuff that you can do in it. But at the end of the day, this story is one that really impressed me, made me care about the lore of a game and a franchise that I haven't cared about up to this point, and that's why it's so high on my list. So yeah, I don't really have anything else to say. So let's get into our top threes. And what is your number three, Jeff?
Number three is Wolong Fallen Dynasty.
Wow,
Um,
wow.
I love the hell out of this game. Um, yeah, like the honestly, I thought I was never gonna get past the tutorial. That tutorial boss is still like the hardest thing in that game, and that's because you don't get co-op until you beat it. Um, and then after that, I jumped in with a bunch of randoms and helped people and all that sort of stuff. And that game is just so much fun. The combat is great. The boss encounters are fantastic. Like the final cutscene when you defeat that final boss, it's amazing. Like you're just flying in the air, and then all these summon things that you have. It's literally like just like Ash Ketchum just like running at his like toughest Pokemon, and then all his Pokemon are like running behind him. Like it has that feel to it, and it is such like the level design is fantastic. The combat is just superb. Like I thoroughly loved that game. I haven't jumped into any of the additional content because generally I'm usually a one and done when it comes to stuff. It's very rare that I jump into additional content. Um, but yeah, Wolong Fallen Dynasty is absolutely superb. It's I think still available on Game Pass, so I strongly suggest checking it out. Like if you can get past that first boss,
I
there is
enj-
a
I
tremendous
I
game.
enjoyed what I played of it, but I could not beat that first area, and therefore
Yeah, that
I
tutorial
gave
boss
up.
is because like you take his health bar down, you're like yes, and then he gets back up, and you're like shit, and then like and the thing that I didn't know is that there's this button press type of thing you have to do when his second phase is done, which triggers a cutscene, and if you don't do that, the fight keeps going.
Oh,
So if you don't see the prompt to press the certain buttons, you can die still having that ability to pull that off, and it I didn't know that. So like I would see this thing pop up, but I'm so focused on the action that I'm not looking at what the prompt should be.
oh
And I
wow.
think honestly, if it just froze the game and said press these buttons and then it triggers the fight, that would have been great. But honestly, I think co-op should have just been available right from the start, and more people would have played it because I know tons of people that bounced off it because of that tutorial
And
thing.
I absolutely would have played it if it was co-op immediately from the start. I would have said to
Yeah.
you, "All right, Jeff, come and help me, please."
Oh
Definitely
yeah,
would have
because
played it.
like it is an unbelievably good game.
Yeah.
Like to me, it's probably my favorite kind of traditional Souls like, even though I
Okay.
don't really label it like that. Like to me, Wolong Fallen Dynasty to me is the evolution of the Ninja Gaiden games with some Souls like stuff, like in terms of like respawning the enemies and
I'd
stuff.
agree
But
with that.
even
I'd
like
agree with that from what I've played.
you know, yeah,
Um.
it's to me it's just way more of a Ninja Gaiden style game.
So, so my top three is interesting because, well, to be fair, actually, all of my top 5 at some point were my game of the year this year. I want to stress that. Um, so my third place game is a game that I know isn't in Jeff's list, and that is Starfield. Um, Somewhat controversial, perhaps. I know, a bit of a mixed reception kind of game. But for me, I think that Starfield was just a case of I haven't played that type of RPG in so many years that it just hit all the right notes and it did all the right things. And, it was the least buggy Bethesda game that we've ever had at launch. And that's not to say there weren't issues, but it was by far the least buggy Bethesda game ever at launch. Um, it was improved in terms of combat. I think shooting and everything felt so much better than it's ever felt in a Bethesda game as well. The game was really slow to start, and I think that it's a weird game because it's a game that doesn't want you to play it like it's a Bethesda game. People who've played that will understand what I mean, but it's very strange because it is a Bethesda game, but because the structure is different, being a space game, you have everything that is normally in one massive map spread out across a universe. So it doesn't mean that those things aren't there. It's just that a lot of people will never find a lot of that cool stuff because it's so spread out.
Yeah, yeah. Like my biggest issue with that is like, is that the way you get to those locations is very menu driven
Yeah,
and not fun.
yeah. So
But like, yeah, it's like I do understand why people do love it, and I also understand why like people like myself think
absolutely,
it's fine.
yeah, absolutely. No, I absolutely do understand the criticisms of it for sure. It's like in my
Like,
review, one of the things I said is I actually think the biggest problem with the game is the lack of tutorialization because a lot of the issues I saw that people were having was, oh, this is really menu based and things take way too long because you have to go into a menu, then into another menu, and all this kind of stuff, right?
yeah.
And the problem was pretty much everything in the game has a much faster way to do it, but the game never tells you and you have to figure it out on your own. Um, but having, I think that, okay, there can be some criticism over the fact that there's a lot of loading screens and things like that. I didn't find that to take away from my experience too much because at the end of the day, loading screens are going to come back into video games at some point. We've just been spoiled over the last few years in terms of having minimal or very quick loading screens. But in 5 years' time, that isn't going to be the case. Games will be bigger, they'll take longer to
See,
load.
I just I just honestly like like I wish that the story had been more around that one side quest where you go undercover with the Crimson Fleet. If that had been expanded out to be the whole story of saving the galaxy from this and all that kind of stuff,
That
I would have
side
been
quest
way
was
more invested.
brilliant. That side quest was
That
brilliant.
side quest to me is the best part of that game because the actual main story, I was bored out of my mind. And it's like,
I can understand that
you
because
know,
that main story takes. I actually think by the end it was very interesting to me, but it takes way too long to get to that
yeah.
interesting point.
And like the thing with that the last point I'll add on that is like you never discover anything. For being a sense of explorers, you never discover anything because you're like, oh, we have to go and get these sacred objects. I'm like, sweet. All right, let's do this. I will discover them. No, we know where they are. You just have to go there. And then it's like we found this we found these temples, and they're like, oh my god, we never knew these existed. This is amazing. It's like I'm gonna go find them. No, 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 it's fine. We know where they are. Like it that was the part that bugged me because the thing that
They
the
could
Crimson
have.
Fleet
They.
mission does
Mm, I was gonna
is
say
like
they could
it
have added more exploration, right? And that's is about, like you're
yeah,
saying, is about being a space explorer, and then the main quest is like go here, do this, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's why I liked the Crimson Fleet mission, is because it gave you agency to kind of go about what you wanted kind of in your own way. You could join the Crimson Fleet and screw over the cops, or you could basically like
Yeah.
kind of it was so much fun. Like that
and
part,
and
that whole
and
quest
that's
line was
why I
great.
say, that um in a weird way, for that exact reason, that's why I actually found Starfield's story in the end to be more engaging than any of the other Bethesda stories in the past. And I think it's because they did something they don't normally do, which is they decided, we have a story to tell you. This is what the story is. So we're going to tell a traditional story of a video game inside of what our video game normally is, which is let the player decide what the story is. And I think because they did almost that like super linear go here, do this story, it was off putting for people because that's not what you expect from Bethesda. Where it became most interesting to me is when you realize that, you know, the lore and the world of this and the universe of this game means that the story hasn't finished and in a way doesn't finish. Um, and we've seen, I think they handled New Game Plus in the most interesting way that I've ever seen. And we've
Yeah,
seen
I think the story does finish. I think jumping back in and doing the new game plus stuff just allows you to see a slightly alternative version of pushing through that story again.
Mhm.
You know, like
Kind of, but what I mean is,
depending on which
I,
new game plus you get, because
I, I
there's some
guess,
weird ones.
I
But
guess what I mean is though, the story doesn't have a definitive end because the story is, do you want to go through this thing and become a Starborn, right? And if you go through that thing, your character's story in this universe continues. So it's so
yeah,
and I'm
but aren't you just
interested,
going through the exact same content?
kind of, but I guess what I mean is I'm talking more about like the wider narrative of the universe as opposed to the core
Yeah,
story, because we've seen that there are people that have done they've done 300 runs of New Game Plus and they're still finding new things. I saw someone the other day who, when they went to Constellation on a New Game Plus run, it was actually themselves running Constellation. And it's like,
yeah. It's not one where like there are a bunch of kids or like they're all
so so
plants
they
or
so
all
they've
sorts of.
done some really interesting stuff, and that
Yeah,
that kind of stuff excites me for what can be done in this universe and with this
yeah.
overall
I'm
story,
excited to
because
see the additional content, like the
because
shattered
because
space or
what you
whatever.
can do, because of what this story is and how they've handled New Game Plus, what
Yeah,
you can actually achieve with DLC and with additional content in this game is probably has a wider range than any Bethesda game ever before. Um, but
yeah.
yeah,
Like I am interested.
it just ultimately it just blew me away. But I think that part of that is right game at the right time, and being a type of RPG that we don't get very often, because the last single player Bethesda RPG was 2015, right? So, and nobody makes RPGs quite in the same way that they do. Um, I think Outer Worlds was probably the closest we got to a Bethesda style RPG in the in between time. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited to see the future of Starfield. I am happy to see as well that they're continuing to improve it, which is not something traditionally that Bethesda actually do. Normally, they kind
Yeah,
of leave the game as it is and they let modders kind of do the work.
I wonder if the that modding team will actually come back because they said like, yeah, we're not doing the Starfield with friends anymore because the game's too boring.
Yeah. I was happy to see that they said on one of the official updates there's going to be city maps added, because like I said, in the past
Revolutionary.
in in the past that is not something Bethesda would have done though, right? Like if they made their game and there was an issue with it, they would have just left it. So I
They
don't
provided maps to guide makers as well too, which is the dumbest thing.
yeah, it's so strange. So strange. But
Yeah.
I just really liked it. I did, and
Yeah.
ultimately in the end there were two games that I liked more than it. But as for if I was having not played enough of Baldur's Gate 3 yet, Starfield is my RPG of the year. I'll put it that way. Um, so moving forward, Jeff, we're into our top twos now. What do you have at number two?
Number two for me is Armored Core 6: The Fires of Rubicon.
Wow. Okay.
Uh, that game is so good. Like I ended up getting code for it, otherwise I probably wouldn't have bought it because the Armored Core series has never really interested me. But no, going through and playing that game, it is exhilarating. It is also very, very tough. I mean, FromSoft definitely brought their kind of like their penchant for difficulty to the game. It's not a Souls-like really at all, other than again just how the bosses are kind of structured is where that FromSoft design comes from. But you can usually find builds that kind of like help cheese a lot of things because like I went into it with like double shotguns after a while and like you just obliterate like you have these like challenge rooms which is how you kind of upgrade ranks and stuff, and I would just double shotgun the hell out of everything there. And it is like there were fights where I was like, I'm not going to be able to beat this. like
This
like
is
there was one
another
where I was like,
this is another game that I really want to play, and I just haven't got around to. So I'm delighted to hear you say how good it is.
it is so good. Like if you've ever been on the fence for a mech game, this is the one to get into. The fights can be certainly challenging. There's one that takes place in like this open lake, and like when I beat it, I was like, yes. And it's like, wait, no, it's getting back up, and I'm like, no, you son of, oh my god. And like I'm there for like another like hour basically trying, and there are different endings and stuff. And then when you go into New Game Plus, it allows you to make the other choices so you can see the other things. Um, but yeah, it is an unbelievable game. It looks great. It runs absolutely fantastic. Some of the bosses are some of the most incredible things that I've seen this year. Um, I think like my favorite boss I think still this year is probably Remnant 2. That's another honorable mention that I could toss in there.
Yeah.
Because like that cube boss in
That
Remnant
that
2 is
boss
amazing.
is one of the best bosses I've ever seen in a video game. Oh, I'll just
Yeah.
say it. Period.
But Armored Core 2, Armored Core sorry 6, Fires of Rubicon though is my number 2. It
Lovely,
is absolutely fantastic.
lovely, lovely. I'm gonna play a little game with you. What do you think my number two is, Jeff?
I think your number 2 is probably going to be Alan Wake 2 so that my Baldur's Gate 3 can take it.
You wish.
No, I do wish. No, number 2, um,
Hmm.
I'm going to say Final Fantasy 16.
It is. It is Final Fantasy
Yeah.
16, which is not something I expected, but as I was thinking back over the games that I played this year, I I started thinking about what are the ones that have stuck with me the most, right? What are the ones that did something I didn't expect them to do? And the story in Final Fantasy 16 just really grabbed me. And I felt a deep connection to Clive in the game. I felt for what he was going through. I felt for all of the characters, right? There are multiple characters in this game that I love. And the way I described it before was that for me, Final Fantasy 16 is my Final Fantasy 7. And I think Final Fantasy fans understand what I mean when I say that, where for a lot of people, Final Fantasy VII is their favorite, and it's their one that made them kind of connect with the Final Fantasy franchise. For me, that is Final Fantasy 16 because I'm gonna play this DLC eventually. I'll potentially review it if it's big enough to do so. But I just loved the game. I do have issues with it in the sense of, it's not really an RPG game, as we discussed before.
A character action game.
It's basically Devil May Cry, but Final Fantasy. And that is what made it, that's what made it so enjoyable to me. I'm
Strangers of Paradise is more of a Final Fantasy game.
I bet it is. I bet it is. Like this game this game has RPG things in it that don't need to be in it. That kind of tells you how little of an RPG it is. But I really enjoyed it. I thought the combat was really engaging. Yes, there's that element of like once you get certain abilities, you kind of find the ones you like and stick to those. But I liked the ability to have that freedom to kind of choose the attacks I wanted, and the way that you can chain some of those attacks together was actually really, really impressive to me. Um, I would say that I haven't played many Final Fantasy games, 15, 16, and then 7 remake. But gameplay wise, this was the one that kept me most engaged on a moment to moment basis. Um, and then, like I said, character wise, it's the characters I'm most connected with, and world wise, it's the one I wish that I knew more about. I don't one negative element of the story and narrative of Final Fantasy 16 is I don't think they actually build out the world quite well enough because they focus on really building out the different characters and the different kind of groups in the game, because it's basically Game of Thrones Final Fantasy is this story that you're going through. But yeah, ultimately it was I debated between this game and Starfield for my number 2, but the reason this game got number 2 is purely because the story just connected with me on such a deep level, and made me care more than I expected to going into the game. Um, so, with that being said, I don't really need to ask you this because I know the result. But what is your number 1, Jeff?
Yeah, my number one is Baldur's Gate 3. Uh, this game is a achievement that I don't think we've seen in the industry for years. This was a game. This is a studio that is independent, that basically released a sequel to a game that hasn't had its prior entry for like decades.
Yeah,
And they created a game that is so diverse in its gameplay and what you do throughout the story that I don't think any player has the same experience going through. You can play it with up to like I think three other friends and go through that game in multiplayer. And it's just one of those games that is so detailed in its story. Like any choice that you pushes the story forward. You never get locked into something. You can always find your way out. It is a like it's like playing D&D with the best DM you can think of who always
yeah,
has a way out of something.
yeah,
And like honestly, the amount of dialogue that is in that game that is spoken, they just put out a free epilogue which adds 3,000 more lines of
it's
dialogue.
crazy.
Um this game is again it is a phenomenal achievement that
Yeah,
shows that you can be as gritty and detailed in what you do for a game and it brought people into the D&D space and into the CRPG space, like in like Elden Ring, where people didn't play those games, and suddenly they're like, I'm going to play that game. And it is,
I think it
to me,
helps. It helps when
insane impact.
everybody's talking about how good it is, right? Like,
Oh, for sure. But I mean, like, to me, like, I don't think a game has taken over the narrative in this year as big as Baldur's
yeah.
Gate 3.
And also, let's be real.
Um,
I spoke about surprises earlier. I think another
yeah,
element of it is that for the majority of people who played this game, it was way better than they expected it to be. You know, I
yeah,
remember
because
on
Divinity Original Sin 2 was good, but this is
yeah,
a
and
whole other
I
level.
remember that on the lead up to the launch of the game, the conversation was like, yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 is probably going to be good, but ultimately we've all got our eyes on Starfield, right? That was kind of what was happening at the time.
Well, I mean, not necessarily true because this game's been in early access for three
Of
years,
course,
so
but
people already knew leading up.
yeah, but I mean in more terms of how it captured the general public, because general public beforehand weren't really paying much attention. And then this game came out and everybody started playing it. And then it came out on PlayStation. And I know that there are people who bought this game that never would and probably never will play a game of this type ever again. Like it's captured people in a way that is very, very unique and doesn't happen often in video games. And I
Yeah,
think
the
that
last time was Elden Ring, and before then, I don't know.
And I think that, as you said as well, it's just such an achievement of video games because it shows what is possible if you really want to do it. You know, like you talked about the amount of dialogue in the video game. It probably has more dialogue than most video games ever made. You know,
Yeah,
it,
and it all just like interconnects in ways that funnel through what you do for the story.
yeah,
So like, you might you might go through the game 4 or 5 times and still find new storylines that bring in new dialogue within then branch off to different
yeah.
things. It's like,
Well, it's like
you said you're about 10 hours in,
mm,
but like
but
wait until you start seeing some of those choices
yeah,
really spider out.
and it's like um I saw someone tweet yesterday, I think it was, that they were considering restarting it because they had been made
That's
aware
probably,
that they had killed half of the main
yeah, they
characters.
probably killed Gale, and then they probably like,
It's just
yeah,
like,
they probably ended up like continuing on with one person's storyline, and if you do that, then that kills off another one. Like, there's tons of ways that you can yeah, like
yeah. So,
butcher that because
so I
like,
really like, but I really like that because that is something that and don't get me wrong, I'm not necessarily going to want to replay a 150-hour game, but
yeah,
at the same time, it's nice to have that knowledge that if I choose to replay this game 3, 4, 5 years down the line, I can replay it and have a totally different experience. Like that.
yeah, like
That's amazing to
there's a
me.
character that you can recruit in one of the missions where you have to take out these three bosses, and one of those characters you can recruit into your party if you're playing like an evil line. But you can actually take that character and transmute them into a sheep and then take them with you past where they would have expired and then kind of convert them to be good and be on that team and still have those members. People found a way to break this game and it did not break.
That's crazy.
Like
That's actually crazy.
that to me is like the definitive definition of what a game of the year essentially should be. It is a game that is an experience like no other.
I agree, and that's
And
why
like,
my number one is Alan Wake 2. And this is the problem that we've had for months, right? Ultimately is like both of these games are doing the same thing in a very different way, in very different genres. And I wish that we could award Game of the Year to both of them because I really do think they are both very deserving of it. I just Yeah, everything
Yeah,
you
I'm
just
not
said,
there with you on that end of it, but I mean, like, I do appreciate that people love it.
everything that you just said about Baldur's Gate 3 is how I feel about Alan Wake 2. And what I mean by that is like Alan Wake 2 tells a narrative in a way that I've never seen a video game do before. Um to a level that I've never seen a video game do, and it also uses this transmedia style of having music and live action and gameplay and everything all contribute to the narrative, right? It even has technically it has books and writing as part of the narrative. Like it's so phenomenal. And say what you will about the story, I really liked it personally. I liked the story, I liked the characters, I liked the twists and turns. I played the new game plus with the new ending, which answers a lot of questions from the original ending. Um it was a phenomenal game, and I know that some people will sort of sit there and say maybe it falls down in the gameplay a little bit. But when I replayed it on New Game Plus, I actually think the gameplay is a lot better than people seem to think it is. I think it's just the fact that, it's not exceptional in the same way the rest of the game is. I think that's all it is. I think it's, but I would still say that that gameplay is very good. Like, the you talked about shooting earlier. I actually think the shooting in this game is really good. I think it feels good. I think it sounds good.
Yeah, I
Um,
did. I'm definitely not there. I don't think the shooting was good at all.
interesting,
Like,
interesting.
because I mean, like, we have Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space on like my
Uh,
list, for
uh,
example, and to those have
to be
way better
clear,
shooting.
both of those are better. I wouldn't dispute that.
Yeah,
But I'm just saying it's not like I play this game and I go, oh, this gameplay is bad. It's not like I go, oh, the shooting is bad. Like, do you know what I mean? There's no part of this game where I sit and say to myself, oh, that's not very good, or that's only okay. Like that just I don't know this, and Jeff, because I told you while I was playing it, this game just captured me in a way that I really didn't expect. And it's probably next to Avatar the best looking game of the year. um I think it has the best audio design. I think it has, you know I think it has the best narrative this year. Obviously I haven't played enough of Baldur's Gate 3, but I think in terms of a linear, the story being told is what they want to tell you, and that is it. I think it's the best narrative this year. Um, and yeah, I was amazed by so much of this game, and it will live with me for years. And I said to you, Jeff, this isn't only my game of the year, but this would be near the top of my games of all time. I'm not saying it would be the top, but it would certainly be in that conversation of a top 5 or a top 10 for sure. So yeah, what do we do, Jeff? What is our actual game of the year? Because I really don't
well,
know.
yeah, because like the thing for me, it's like Alan Wake for me is not even an honorable mention for me, because like for me, it's like I would give that game probably about a 7.5. So like for me, it just feels weird. Um, Rewarding that is such a lopsided kind of vote to it, because like I was looking at this list here, and if we were to number them
Yeah,
in
okay.
terms of like number one would be worth 10, number two would be worth
Yeah, so if we
9,
were to weight them
and
with
so forth.
points.
If we were to weight them with points, our game of the year with 12 points, I think,
Mm,
would be Resident Evil 4 Remake.
okay.
I think second place would be Diablo with 11. Now, this is just napkin math, because Baldur's Gate essentially would only have 10 points. Armored
Yes.
Core would only have 9 points. Wolong would only have 8 points. Robocop would only have 7 points. And Resident Evil is both of our top 5,
Yeah.
and it has 6 points, which puts it to 12 points.
Yeah.
So, as far as I know, that's the highest scoring
I think
game
that's
if we
right.
did a
Based
point
on
system.
yeah, if we were doing a point system, I think you are right there
And
because
Diablo was your 3, right?
Diablo was my fourth place.
Fourth one. So 10, 9, 8, 7. So 7 and 4 is, wait, hold on, roll it.
7 and 4 is
10,
11.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. So yeah, that would only have 11 points for Diablo.
Yeah.
So our highest scoring game in terms of points would be Resident Evil 4 Remake. And honestly, that's a game that's on both our lists.
Yeah.
It's in our top 5.
Yeah.
To me, if that was our website's game of the year, I would be absolutely fine with that.
Yeah.
Because
I
to
I think
me, that
I think
game,
if we're deciding it between the two of us, that
yeah,
should be our game of the year, right? Because it made both of our top fives. It actually was in the
yeah.
same position on both of our lists.
And like to me, honestly, I would be absolutely fine with that because anything within my top 5 for me could be a game of the year. Because like, and yes, I do include RoboCop Rogue City because holy fuck, that
Wow.
game is fun. Um, that was very close to being my game of the year. I'm
Fair.
literally not kidding. And the only reason it's not is because if the people use the Unreal Engine 5 people system that Epic has as part of their package, if it used that and the people looked that good, this would probably be my game of the year. Um, but for me, it's like yeah, like if honestly, if we were to just completely like eliminate our top game,
Yeah.
which is not on anyone else's list. To me, like having Resident Evil 4 remake as like Analog Stick games like game of the year,
Mm.
I would be absolutely fine with that because it's a game that we both have come to terms
Does
with
but does
it
that
being in our
but
top
does
five.
that mean we're making Diablo 4 our second place?
Yeah, probably. But I mean, there is no second place. We only have game of the year and then our categories.
True, true. Um oh oh
Like we could make a numbered list with our the only problem is at a certain point every single one of those games has the same number of points.
Yeah, so it's then how do you separate them, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like there's already going to be that discussion when it comes to some of our categories and things like that because like
Yeah.
there's a very particular
In
game that I want to
unless
win a
unless for
particular
game of the
category.
year we just do like a top 3. We could do a top 3 for game of the year.
Yeah, because it would be Resident Evil 4 and then Diablo 4. And then I
It
want to
would be it
say
would be tied.
Hi-Fi Rush.
Well, how high did you have Hi-Fi Rush?
Oh wait, what did you have it at?
I only had it at 9 because I haven't finished it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I wouldn't. So
So it
our
would be it
third
would
place
be
one would be one
Alan
of the
Wake and Baldur's
tens,
Gate, right?
and then that's where your tiebreaker comes in.
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause it would be Alan Wake 2 then.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. We'll make Resident Evil 4 our game of the year. I agree with that. So we'll do a top 3. We'll do it how we're saying right now. Resident Evil 4 game of the year for the site. There you have it, people. Second place, Diablo 4. Third place, I'll be kind to Jeff because I see with Baldur's Gate 3 what he is saying and what so many other people are saying. I will give Baldur's Gate 3 begrudgingly third
Mhm.
place.
Well, we can just do a top 5, and then you can have Alan Wake right there.
Fair, fair. Let's do that then. There you go.
Because like then I would assume that number 5
Would be
would
Hi-Fi, right?
be would be Hi-Fi Rush because it's
Because
a
I gave
game
it
that we
2 points and you
both
gave it. Unless actually
10,
no, it would be
8,
Phantom
7,
Liberty.
6,
It would be
5.
Phantom Liberty, right? Because what did you get? Because I put Phantom Liberty at my 7, so that would be 4 points, and you put it at what position? 8, which would be
8
3.
would be 3.
So that's
That'd be
seven
7
points.
points. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and then you put that. yeah, I think Phantom Liberty would be our number five
Yeah,
then.
because I only gave Hi-Fi 2 points because it was my ninth place.
Yeah, and I gave it five because it's number six.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there we
Yeah,
go.
no, I mean
There we
that
go.
works for me. That's probably a top five that doesn't resonate across the entire industry, but it is what it is. Only having
But
access to playing
also
some
that's
games.
what happens as well when both of us are so split on our individual game of the year, and that isn't going to happen every year, right? Like
Yeah.
it just
It also comes down to the fact that you haven't played a lot of my top 10,
Yeah, that's true.
like in terms of like,
And it's like I said to you, if I had played more of Baldur's Gate 3, it probably would have been on my list, which likely would have made it our game of the year. So it's just one of those things. But next year is going to be very interesting, and we'll talk about that very soon. But I guess there you go. For now, a game that we didn't expect is our game of the year, but it makes the most sense given our lists. I think you'd agree with that, right, Jeff?
yeah.
So, Resident Evil 4 Remake is Analog Stick Gaming's Game of the Year. Check out sometime after Christmas our other categories. I know Jeff's going to work on those. I've been putting together my nominations for those categories over the last week or so, and I'll continue to do so. Uh, do you know when you're going to have that out roughly, Jeff, or do we just.
I have three, six, nine, 12. I have 14 categories left to add because I've got quite a bit of them already going. So once I have those set and I get yours, and then I'll do the scores and stuff because that'll be a 10, 8, 6, 4, 2 type of thing.
Yes, yeah,
Um, and then there'll be a couple games that'll be tied that I do want to have discussions about because I feel
absolutely.
like in one category especially, I feel that one game does it tremendously better. But we'll get into that one. And then there'll be a few categories, obviously, like like best fighting. I only have three. Best racing.
Yeah,
I only have three.
yeah.
There'll be some categories that won't have a total of the five nominees and stuff like that. But
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
like best JRPG right now, for me, it's like both of the games in my nominations are Legend of Hero games because they released two this year, and that's the only JRPG that I played.
That's funny.
Um,
That is funny.
so there'll be those ones as
And
well
and
too.
there are also some categories where I actually haven't played any games, so some of those will be
Probably best
decided
ER AR, eh?
completely.
Because I think best
Yeah.
DR AR, I don't think you played any of those,
No,
but
I haven't.
you know,
So there will be certain categories that are decided primarily by Jeff, but I'm sure there will be certain categories that are probably decided primarily by me as well. So
yeah, like best accessibility, like right now, I see you putting Forza Horizon or Forza Motorsport at the top list, and I'm pretty sure it's going to make it.
yeah.
Like
I put
there's
it
that
this
end of
way,
it as well.
I only have two nominations for that category, and Forza Motorsport is the number one.
Yeah.
So
So I'm pretty sure like that one will take it and stuff like that. And, same with like best racing. Like there's I've only played like certain amount of racing games, so I only have the three in there right now.
mm,
But yeah, so like there's because we have some like unconventional ones like best standout character, best
absolutely.
handheld game, best spin-off,
So
best sequel,
and
best
that's
community game.
why I want to make sure that people head over to the website to check all this stuff out when we have it. It will be sometime, I imagine, by 2024. um, we're taking
Yeah, like I've got
obviously. Go on,
I've
Jeff.
got New Year's Day off.
Okay.
So I might end up posting it then if I've got everything. So that'll be in like it's over a week
Yes.
to get that going and stuff like that. And then it'll have our own personal top tens. And
Yeah.
then it will have a game of the year type of little splash page. So I'll probably end up getting a quote for you for Resident Evil 4, and then I'll do both quotes on a big picture of it and stuff like that. And then
Yes.
below it will be the nominations and stuff. I'm going to split them into individual nominations, unlike I did last year, where like it would say like and this is the wrong title, wrong year, and everything. It'll be like Dave the Diver won this, and this. I'm gonna have the individual categories.
That makes sense.
Um,
Yeah, that makes sense.
so there's gonna be that. So I got to create some graphics for that. And then the graphics for our top 10, I'm gonna do like a tiered picture thing and stuff with like the numbers and stuff in the titles, and then
Fantastic.
collect it on one image with their names. So it's gonna be that going on there, but that's
So
pretty much
there
about
you
it.
have it. The one year that I won the Game Awards predictions, I was kind to my co-owner, and I
Hey,
gave.
you can still put the tiebreaker of Alan Wake being 3 instead of 4.
No, no,
You
no,
have
no. Because I do think the right choice ultimately is Baldur's Gate 3. And the reason I say that, and this is what I'll end on about the game, is that I think its impact on the industry is unrivaled this year in terms of conversation, how it captured people, how it's made people think about what a video game can actually be and what it can do. So therefore,
even the guy that is the lead on Rogue Trader, which is the game that I'm currently playing right now. It's another CRPG.
mm,
Um, he was even saying that like he is not expecting Rogue Trader to do anywhere near the numbers of Baldur's Gate 3 or have near the impact because Baldur's Gate 3, like Larian, had completely different ways of releasing that game through early access and
yeah,
having that kind of reach. But I will say that if you don't like certain aspects of Baldur's Gate 3, you might like Rogue Trader because it
interesting.
fairly clearly tells you where you can move and then what moves you can do, which I know was an issue that you had with Baldur's Gate 3.
It is. It
Um,
is
and it's just as chunky as the Warhammer properties are. And
interesting. I may take a
you
look
get
at
to
that
pick
one
like
for
a
sure.
it's good so far, plays on Steam Deck well. But yeah.
Lovely. So where I'll end this episode is I'd ask you all to please share it with your friends, family, all that sort of thing. Have a very good Christmas break. We will see you in the new year. Please let us know your game of the year for 2023, either in the comments
Do a
or
top
on.
five. Give us variety. Do top five in the comments.
There we go. Top 5 in the comments. Maybe let us know if we had decided between Alan Wake 2 and Baldur's Gate 3 for Game of the Year. If we had gone with one of our personal top games, which one would you have chosen if you've played both of them? Because I'd be interested to see the split on that as well. But yeah, there you have it. And like I said, we should be back. The plan currently is that 2 weeks from today we will record again, so you will get an episode. We're recording the Friday before Christmas right now, so 2 weeks from now you'll get an episode, which will be the second week of January. Is essentially the
Fingers
plan.
crossed.
But every time I say things like that, I get ill. so so we'll see. But I am looking forward to it because like I said, and Jeff, I don't know if you were here when I said it because you were sorting things out, but
I hear
next
you.
episode will be our 2024 big preview. That's what we're going to call it, the big preview. Um so hopefully you join us for that, and we look forward to giving you more games coverage next year, whether that be here on Gaming Mix or on analogstickgaming.com. Please stick with us and, follow everything we do because we appreciate all the support. And we will see you next time. Goodbye.
You guys.